You're listening to the Sales Tax People podcast.
In today's episode, Paul, Parr, and Danny dive into the biggest myth in sales tax, which is, I'm not based in that state, so I don't know tax there. It's one of the most expensive assumptions a business owner can make, and it could cost them tens of thousands of dollars in back taxes, penalties, and interest. Things like SaaS, web design, data processing, you're not off the hook. All of it is taxable in more states than you think. If you sell online, ship across state lines, or operate in multiple jurisdictions, this one's for you.
A sales tax myth. So it's either something you hear about frequently, that comes up frequently, or you've, just seen a big enough issue that it's one that you wish would go away. Now, Paul, before you get all crazy with like conspiracy theories, we're not talking about conspiracy theories here. These are myths. And if you get crazy with conspiracy theories, I'll get even crazier. So we don't want that today.
This is true.
If we go conspiracy theory, this podcast will go from 10 minutes to 10 hours. There's no doubt about it.
This is true.
We'll have to change the name to the Sales Tax People Living in the Rabbit Holes or something like that.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, a myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon. It's a widely held false belief or idea.
Widely held.
A lot of those.
Say it again. It's a
widely held but false belief or idea.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So we get some of those in sales tax for sure.
And while you're thinking, in true Parr fashion, while you're thinking of one, Parr, we're going to have you go first. Let me just highlight why there's no one like Paul Johnson, or PJ as we like to call him, because here we are. We ask a question and Paul just goes right to the research, which is such a great habit to be in when you are a sales tax leader and a sales tax trusted advisor, because he's not just going to answer things. He's going to ask more questions and he's going to research and figure out like even what we're asking or what we're talking about.
It's true. When it comes to sales tax, you got to make certain that you understand the facts. What are the facts? And so we talk about what the myths are in sales tax. Well, what exactly is a myth? And how would you define a myth? Let's start with that to make sure that we're on a common ground. Make sure everybody's on the same page.
And in addition to understanding the sales tax facts, you got to understand the myths.
This is true.
So, Parr, what's a myth? Did we give you enough time?
What is a widely held but false idea or concept? Well, here's one. My service is not taxable in the state where I run my operations, so I don't have any tax responsibilities. Or I guess the broader myth would be I just provide services, so I don't have a sales tax issue. We worked with an advertising or marketing agency recently, and they're based in Utah. For the most part, marketing services, advertising services, web design services, helping you with your SEO and other efforts. Maybe you have a fractional CMO, whatever the case may be, not taxable in Utah, but services are rendered across the country and maybe even around the world. When it comes to marketing, remember, you have to keep remembering this. Post-Wayfair, my sales tax responsibility is based on where my customers are located, not where I'm located, right? So you just always keep that in the back of your mind. So now if I'm a marketing agency, I do all sorts of work. Some of them I listed. And in doing that work, I might be providing those services to customers across the U.S., and I might not recognize that in some states, some aspects of what I do may be taxable. So that's just one myth. And what we found was in Texas, web design services, working on your SEO, can fall under data processing services, can fall under SaaS, can fall under other categories of services that are taxable in Texas. And so we were just able to make this company aware that there are some states where they need to be thinking about a sales tax responsibility where they have customers in that state. So just to be clear again, the broad general myth is all I do is provide services, so I don't have a sales tax responsibility. Not true.
I'm surprised you started with taxability. You didn't start with nexus, because the biggest myth when it comes to sales tax, it always starts with nexus, because we love to start with nexus. We always start with nexus. But the biggest myth is I'm based in California. I don't know Texas tax. I'm not based in Texas. I don't know Texas tax because I'm based in California. Well, that's a common misconception and understanding. The state of Texas can impose upon you the responsibility to collect its tax based on the fact you merely sold more than $500,000 in revenue to customers in Texas. So you got to understand the nexus laws and legislation and how different it is from California to Nevada to Utah across the entire U.S.
That's one that comes up. Call it even like a sub myth or subcategory of that myth around nexus. And
Dear.
I don't
Oh,
I
dear.
don't have a. We're going down the rabbit hole.
Paul, if you want to look up what a sub myth might be, we're going deeper. That's all.
Subterraneous myth. Oh, subterraneous myth. Now I forgot. I don't even remember what I said. No.
Oh man, see what you did.
The myth that I'm talking about is one where, again, it's based on a company being remote, selling services. Hey, this is going to touch on yours too, Parr. I'm selling a service into a state, and I don't even have nexus there. I don't need to worry about it because I don't have employees that are going and doing the installation of that service. Now you're talking about materials, right? But generally, like, people think, okay, I don't have a presence in that state. Like, I'm subbing out the installation, the actual, fulfillment of that service in that state, because sometimes it is just strictly a service, right? And the materials are either non-existent or immaterial. Well, if you're subbing out that work, right, and you're ultimately hiring someone in that state to fulfill that service, and your business model requires such, you got some nexus problems. So,
Yeah, that is a myth. I don't have physical nexus, right? In today's world, we're talking about economic nexus so often that we don't, but often people will skip over physical nexus. So sometimes when we're having a conversation with a company, we realize, or they realize, hey, we don't think we've reached the threshold for economic nexus. And then we start talking about their business operations, and we find out they've got third-party contractors or third-party sales reps that are acting on their company's behalf that either live in other states or go into those other states to conduct some of that business. So I might be just across the border in one state, but I go into another state to conduct, either I'm a third party sales rep, or in a lot of cases, to your point, it's a third party contractor or third party installer who might be doing some installation for some sort of software as a service. So there might be some sort of a modem or some sort of internet equipment that they're setting up or attaching, and that's creating a physical presence in that state for a company that's like, hey, we don't have anybody there. We don't do any business there. We only use third-party contractors to do all this work, or third-party sales reps. And it's like, yeah, so let's go
They're
back.
1099, Parr. They're 1099 contractors. They're not ours.
I can't
Yeah, that's
control
a
what
myth.
they do. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. That actually goes back, I believe, to the 60s or 70s. Those laws have been on the books for a long time. In all of these states, that is a myth that people have, is that they're not physically doing business in a state. But the nexus laws would indicate that they are, if they've got third-party contractors or reps.
You know what's similar to that is when you're drop shipping. I'm working with this manufacturer, and I'm selling what he's providing or what he's manufacturing. I'm selling it to a customer in Texas, but he's shipping it to Texas, so I don't know tax on that one. No, you sold him an old wall of cup, a lovely sales tax people old wall of cup. You sold it to him, and you have employees in Texas, so you have nexus in Texas. You started with nexus, you have a tax responsibility. So drop shipments in general, just a great myth that they don't create a tax responsibility or nexus and result ultimately in a tax liability.
yeah, another common one is, again, it's a common theme of, if you look at just the high level, and you could call it even a foundation of a lot of these myths, is I'm doing this or I'm not doing that. My business does this or my business doesn't do that. So I don't need to worry about sales tax. As soon as someone says, so I don't need to worry about sales tax, I know there's likely something to look at. Not necessarily that they are incorrect and they have some significant, tax exposure, but usually with that mentality and that approach, that's a trigger, you could say, to ask more questions and actually dig in a little bit and both confirm some of what their suspicion is, that they don't need to worry about sales tax, but it's usually not that black and white. And an example that comes to mind, in fact, the myth that was on my mind as we came into this, is someone that's manufacturer, or they're wholesaling in some way, shape, or form, right? Their business model is what a lot of people would call distribution. Oh, well, I'm not selling to the consumer, and I'm not selling retail, so I don't need to worry about sales tax.
Yeah, these are B2B sales, Danny. They're not B2C. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not selling to the end user, the consumer. I don't have to worry about sales tax. You don't have to worry about sales tax, but you do have to worry about that certificate.
exactly.
Got to get that resale certificate, otherwise under audit. See,
And a lot of times you're dealing with use tax issues too that you got to pay attention to of, are,
potentially.
you're purchasing products exempt and or you're manufacturing them, but are you using or consuming any of these materials and products? And, are you going to need a self-assess and accrue use tax that needs to be reported to the states?
That brings another myth to my mind. What you guys were just talking about, how you distribute, how you sell, B2B versus B2C. Another myth is people get a little bit confused. They say, hey, I sell on Amazon or I sell on Walmart, so I don't have a sales tax collection issue, or I don't create Nexus because they have Nexus. Well, number one, you still create Nexus based on your sales volume. It doesn't always mean that you have the responsibility to collect tax, but even if you sell on some of these platforms where they're the responsible party for collecting, you're the responsible party for collecting tax on sales through your website or other channels that may not be collecting that tax on your behalf. You also should make sure that your marketplace facilitator is functioning according to the law, that they actually are collecting the tax on those sales. So that one hits nexus, taxability, and do I have the responsibility to collect the tax, or does another party have the responsibility to collect the tax? And people get confused on those things. One of the ways we say this now is 3 things you need to know is where you sell, right? That's nexus. What you sell, that's taxability, understanding the taxability of what you sell in each state or jurisdiction, and then how you sell. Right? What channels do you use? Are you selling those B2B, B2C? Are you using marketplace facilitators, et cetera? So where do I sell? What do I sell? And how do I sell it? If you sit down with us and have a conversation, those are the 3 questions we're going to start with just to get an understanding of what your responsibility might be. And real quick, we'll be able to help you understand what your potential responsibility is. And then we can dig in further to understand if there's actually any potential exposure or if any action should take place going forward. Which leads me to this last item, which is earlier, Danny, you were saying something about people having to worry or not worry about it because of the type of organization they are, where they're located, what they're selling, where they're selling, et cetera. And it's super simple. There are some people that don't have to worry about sales tax. The people that have to worry about sales tax or should address it is anybody, anywhere in the world doing business in the U.S., no matter where you're located. If you're
Selling
doing business
products
in the
or
U.S.,
services.
sales tax is a conversation that we should have just to make sure that you don't have a responsibility that has been overlooked, which could result in some exposure, which can result in money out of pocket with penalty and interest. And that's the biggest tragedy in sales tax, is if you could have been compliant and registered, you could have been collecting tax from a willing party who understands the rules, and you didn't. So that tax comes out of your own pocket, works against your margins, but worse than that, salt in the wound, no pun intended, state and local tax, salt in the wound.
To do.
You also may have to pay penalty and interest on those dollars that already were working against your margin. So anybody doing business in the US, and I would add Canada, you want to have a conversation and you want to be addressing the topic of sales tax because it can be a big margin killer.
That's it. Stay out of the world of sales tax myths, people. Greek mythology, that's okay. In fact, that's awesome for a lot of people. Sales tax mythology.
Hey, I can get down on some Percy Jackson. I enjoy it, especially with the grandkids. But sales tax myths, we want to destroy those.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Sales Tax People podcast. If you want to talk about sales tax, or maybe you have an experience that goes along with something we talked about today, or maybe you just want to hear about how Paul's day is going, make sure you send us an email to podcast@sales.tax, or you can text us at 949-355-5098. See y'all again soon.